Well, the Donnelly family were a family that immigrated from Ireland, Northern Tipperary, in the 1840s, early 1840s, along with 70% of the people that populated Lucan. They all came from an area within 5-10 miles, and the Donnelly was one of those families, and they came and farmed on a Roman line, which is just outside of town here. This community was settled initially starting in the 1830s. It was mainly a Protestant community initially. Then in the 1840s, a group of Catholics came out from the same area, Northern Tipperary, and they would settle on the land. And what they would do is they would get a deed, if you like, to the land, not a deed, but actually they would register that they were occupants of that land, and they had 10 years to pay it off. And most people registered that with the Canada Corporation, okay, it was Canada Crown land. And one of the Donnellys, when they came, they settled on a piece of property that was already had been settled on by someone else, and there was a feud broke out, and it ended up James Donnelly killing a person. And that started a feud, a background, and he got convicted and spent 7 years in jail in Kingston. But he had 7 young children, boys and a daughter, and they grew up, and that's where it first started, and a lot of bad blood and a feud that included a lot of different crimes, if you like, fire burnings, a lot of bullying. And there was 2 sets of people in the community. There was actually the friends of the Donnellys, and then there was the people that weren't so happy with the Donnellys. And this feud went on till 1880 when there was a massacre. And it was back and forth between different families, and it was all, though a lot of people think it was a Catholic Protestant, it was all within the Catholic community. And about 2 years before the massacre, there was a new priest brought into the Catholic Church to try and help to sort of see if he could settle this down, because there was, like I said, a lot of crime, barn burnings, lots of fighting, and just a lot of different things going on, and people being charged and everything else. So he was brought in by a bishop to actually see if he could help this out. He formed what he called the Peace Committee, and which was later referred to as Vigilante, and a group of people, they got together and they started to meet, and ironically, the Donnellys and their friends never did. But then on the night of February 4th, 1880, a group of, it's estimated at 40 people, went to the Donnelly homestead, and a lot of people would say, myself included, that most people went there as a way to threaten them, that they had to stop their ways about their misdeeds in the community and that type of thing, and it probably got out of hand, and they murdered 4 people there, and then they went to another family of the Donnellys a few miles away, and they shot one of those individuals. So it was 5. One was shot. The other 4 bodies, they set fire to the house and they were burned, and that was February 4th, 1880. It was a terrible tragedy. No one was ever convicted. There was 2 trials, 6 people. Actually, there were several people arrested in the teens, but only 6 ever got incarcerated. And the one, which was a guy by the name of Carroll, he actually was the first one that was prosecuted. And the first jury was a hung jury. The second jury was acquittal, and they chose not to proceed with the others, and they released the other 5 individuals. They were held at the county jail in London for a year. But were released, and I think that's one of the the Donnellys I classified as a bully of the area. They were, and so over 30 years, it built up, and I know Ray Fazekas. Ray Fazekas is one of the experts. He wrote 2 books, The Donnelly Album and Search of the Donnellys. He's a lawyer by trade, and researched this since the early 1960s. He knows more about it than probably anybody. But he would even admit that this community was about to burst. It was. If you take an analogy with the schoolyard bully can bully someone for so long. Sooner or later, he's gonna push back, right? They can't take it any longer, and that's what happened here. Unfortunately, it was a lot more than a pushback, and you could never justify this. I mean, as the Donnellys did a lot of bad things to their neighbors, but Also, the Donnellys got blamed for certain events that they probably didn't do. Like if I didn't like you, for instance, I could do something to you, and it probably would be blamed on the Donnellys. But a lot of times there was no prosecution because the Donnellys were a brawny bunch that could actually handle themselves very well when it came to intimidation, and they would intimidate witnesses and that type of thing. But that's not to say that other people in the community weren't doing some bad things too, and they were getting blamed for them. So there's no justification for them being murdered. That's for sure, and they should have been brought to trial. Now there's some speculation that the government of the day wanted to put it to bed. It was the biggest mass murder in Canada at the time, and 5 murders in a small community, and it made headlines from St. John, Newfoundland, right to Victoria. I mean, you see clippings where it was covered.